Hey everyone, so today we're going to do a critique of self-help. And before we get to the critique itself, I was thinking it's perhaps important to delineate the difference between criticizing something or being critical of something versus a critique. The reason I want to initially, let's say, put the caveat is because a criticism would be just downright sort of rejecting something and just, not even really digging deep into it and thinking about it in any serious way and giving it the time to understand a certain concept, idea, ideology, whatever. But I think what we're trying to do is a critique, which is like Kant's critique of pure reason. It's where we try to understand a set of principles, doctrines, ideologies, whatnot, and then try and break it down and see both the pros and cons. While yes, there is an element of criticism involved, it's not just purely rejecting the whole thing downright, prima facie, let's say. Rather, it's trying to kind of, work through it in a bit more systematic way and trying to make sense of a certain concept. And today we're going to critique self-help. Lot of things in my head to think about when it comes to self-help, because I used to be super obsessed with it. And there's like a whole, I think it's funny. I think I have like a bit of trauma even from being hyper obsessed with self-help. I have a few stories. I'll tell you about that as we discuss. But yeah, Euwyn, what do you think, man? What are your thoughts on self-help initially, and why do you think it's a topic worth discussing, given that generally you and I are perhaps a bit more interested in like philosophy and theology and culture over like something like self-help, let's say. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I came from self-help too, kind of like you. I'm not sure where you started, because I think where we connected initially was more in the intellectual dark web when we first started.
Yeah, but I think we both had, I would say, for our initial connection always was, and perhaps always will be, Christianity and theology.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's for sure. And that's where we first met anyway. It was in the church. But yeah, no, look, so when I started out with reading, it was all self-help, right? And I think that's quite the common entry into books and reading. It's like, what are the most popular books out there? The one I started out with is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's by Stephen Covey.
Stephen Covey or whoever that guy is.
Yeah, and that's
he's a Mormon. He's like a big Mormon.
He's a Mormon. He is a Mormon. So he's actually a Christian.
And he based a lot of that stuff on Mormonism, I believe. Or like
it's true. No, that's true. That's true. And it was actually a very good book. And the thing about these things is they're good books. They're not bad books. And so when we say it's a critique, we're not trying to say that these books are bad, I suppose. But I suppose still there is a purpose that these books serve. And perhaps, we can talk about the purpose that they serve and how they ignore certain things and how they push for certain things. But there's a whole world out there. And I think, like, at least coming from a place where a self-help book was really helpful, like, it's very interesting just kind of discussing how we progressed from there, I think. But yeah, like, I started with that book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I loved it. I remember I rated it 5 stars at Goodreads. If you look at my Goodreads account, you'll probably see it up top, followed by an amazing, like, super hearty, soulful review on like how amazing the concepts were and this and that. And then that follows up by all the books, right? Because I think 7 Habits, it's kind of within the same realm as all the self-help books. And now maybe it's worth kind of us also just making it clear what self-help is. Like, the books I'm thinking about when I think about self-help are like 7 Habits. Number 1, How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? That realm of books. There's so many more.
Atomic Habits, and if you
Atomic Habits, that's a more modern one. Yeah, the business ones, that's like Cal Newport, Deep Work, for example.
Oh, that's I would, that for me, it's a self-help book for sure. But I would say Cal Newport's, that's a bit more, I don't know, it's an interesting book because I don't want to just...
I haven't read it, so
it's a really good book, actually. It's in fact a really good book. I would even put it in like the realm of sociology, not sociology in like a very academic sense, but it gets close to sociology because it's a really good book, Deep Work.
Okay, so let's put that book aside. But then I guess you can see how it's kind of, there's a realm at which there's self-help, right? It's books that I think something we can define as try and get you from point A to point B, something like that. right? And I think, feel free to jump in if you've got any thoughts, because I'm just trying to open up many holes here.
Well, I mean, if you just Google self-help, the Wikipedia definition is self-help or self-improvement is a self-guided. Let me share my screen. I don't want to just read out things without sharing my screen. Okay, here we go. So if you look at Wikipedia, the page, self-help or self-improvement is a self-guided improvement. Wow, how
A self-guided improvement.
what a definition. Like how helpful is that, right? Is a self-guided improvement. Economically, physically, intellectually, and emotionally, often with a substantial psychological basis. Perhaps it's true. That perhaps is true.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, so I think okay, maybe there are two things I want to mention here then following that. And then we can go and discuss it. Firstly, so the first rabbit hole, I guess, that we can jump into is the first one, I think, is what I just mentioned, right? Which is self-help is kind of getting you from point A to point B. Many times the point B is kind of assumed, right? It's like, you want to become successful, here's how you become successful. And so here's where like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People assumes that you should be effective, you know, or like an effective usually comes in a work family sense. It doesn't tell you why you should be effective in a work and family sense.
And certainly financially, that's a big one, I think.
Financially, yeah. They all assume that the point B is financially, and that probably goes back to our chat that we had last time around happiness, right? Which is, there's a lot of assumptions on like, this makes you happy, this is what it means to be successful as a human being, this is what it means to be effective. And so self-help to me kind of plays in this area where like, here's how to get from point A to point B, but like, we're not telling you why you're at point A and why you're at point B, why there's a point A and point B at all. It's just, here's how you get there in the most efficient and effective and the most bullet point manner, like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, you know, and framework 1, framework 2, that kind of method. So that's interesting, obviously, because for us, a lot of our discussions is not necessarily like where we ought to go all the time, but more like what is the way things are, right? Kind of, that's because I guess that's the preceding discussion to have, like, very often, right? Like if you ask, if the ought we posit is like, for example, in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, you want to be successful so that, you know, you want to be effective so that you can like maximize your production capacity and produce more, you know, not just, you don't produce more at the expense of your production capacity. And there's like so many more, I can't remember the rules anymore, but like, the question is why do you even want to do that? Like, right. And the philosophical question asked is, why not just kill yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's like what Camus said, the only important question in philosophy is suicide. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
I guess if I could kind of reiterate what you said, just to make sure that I understood what you're saying, it's we're given all these frameworks, all these systems, without questioning what drives us towards a certain thing. So let's say we want to get from point A to point B. There isn't any questioning or let's say attempt to understand what actually makes us want to go to point B, whatever it may be, money, happiness, whatever I may call it. And then of course, this journey we're going towards, what are the foundational axioms or presuppositions or assumptions we make when we go on the journey. So as you said, like why not just kill yourself and be instead of being productive? In fact, it's probably easier to kill yourself and end it than spend all this time on, like, I don't know, meditating and exercising and spending all this energy, right? So there is like always, it's the first and foremost, I would say, I don't think self-help ever exists detached from everything else, because that's not how anything in fact exists. There's all these frameworks, systems, whatever we are told to implement in our life to improve, again, they have their place. They are within a culture. They're within a certain zeitgeist, a certain certain ideologies. So they don't exist in silos.
That's true. And yeah, I think you basically summed up what I said, right? I think the question is like, should the odds be the odds? Right, the odds be the odds is kind of an interesting way to put it. And like, why, right? Like, why are the odds as opposed to something else, right? And I think also a helpful delineation to make, you mentioned the cultural zeitgeist, right? Is that well, before I go there, I think self-help is quite a modern
Oh, certainly.
thing, right? In its current form. I think if you trace back to like the Middle Ages and ancient Greek, self-help would be more like self-improvement from the perspective of virtue and morals.
Yeah, of the gods. Or
Yes. Yeah. It's like how do you become a better person as a whole? It's very much the realm of morals, ethics. But then the current form of self-help is not exactly that. Like you wouldn't find the first self-help book and it wouldn't tell you how to become more kind, more, love more,
virtuous, whatnot.
more
Yeah.
virtuous. You won't read that sort of stuff, right? The modern kind of stuff is perhaps the more capitalistic kind of stuff where it's, how do you make more money? How do you become more prosperous? How do you, how do you build a good family, right? Whatever, right? And so the current form of self-help is quite different. And the comment here I want to make that I want to get your thoughts on is I also think there's a helpful delineation to make here is between self-help as a category, which, as I mentioned, it's useful, right? It's useful maybe for people at a certain stage. It's useful for it is useful. It's not a bad thing. The thing I think that deserves a bit more critique is the self-help bros, as you would call it.
Yeah, and the ideology of self-help that the bros tend to subscribe.
Yeah. So it's like many things, right? It's like it's the same thing you call about tech people, right? It's technology itself, I guess, is an interesting to discuss. Tech bros are a different thing entirely, and I guess you can define
tech broism,
whatever, right? Or crypto bros, or whatever bros you want to like. However many bro groups there are out there, right?
Hey, bros or sisters. We don't want to be sexist here.
Yeah. That's implied. But I guess the thing here is there is the thing itself that's self-help, and then there's self-help bros, which are somehow the people who fall into this ideology such that like the world is not much other than just what this thing is, right? Like to a self-help bro, the world is not much more than self-improvement. For a tech bro, the world is not much more than tech and like impact and all of that, right?
Well put.
So that's an interesting delineation, I think, like between the people within the ideology and the thing itself, which might be a bit more neutral and fine, I suppose. So yeah, what do you think about that?
Okay, I think you've both brought the conversation. Okay, let me second. I think you brought the conversation to a good point now, because I think this, you kind of opened up, you allowed me to articulate what I wanted to say. Firstly, I would say, in my view, self-help is a postmodern phenomena. And what I mean by that is that, which is perhaps why that self-help, as you said, Euwyn, it doesn't really have it doesn't question the oughts, it doesn't question what's driving us towards the point B, from A to B. So it's purely focused on the systems. It's like a ruthless pragmatism. It's just get it done. This is how you get it done. Apply these frameworks. James Clear's atomic habits or whatnot, right? My critique of self-help comes in two ways. Firstly, in a more existential sense, and then afterwards, certainly my political critique, where I critique the ideology of self-help. Okay, so the existential one is rather interesting, because here's what I put it this way, right? So as you were talking, it reminded me of Camus' quote from The Shoot, the Fool. He says, a man wants to earn money in order to be happy, and his whole effort and the best of a life are devoted to the earning of that money. Happiness is forgotten. The means are taken for the end. So I'll just replace money with self-help there, right? It'll go like this then. A man wants to practice self-help in order to be happy, and his whole effort and the best of a life are devoted to the earnings of that money, or to the practice of self-help. Happiness is forgotten. The means are taken for the end. Now, happiness is forgotten. Again, happiness is not a big deal here, but let's assume in the context of this quote, the happiness is an ought. I ought to be happy. It's the B the person's moving towards. So within this, though, what I've seen with self-help is that, existentially speaking, the means are taken, then the means replace the end. The means don't become just a means to an end. they become the end in themselves. So what happens is when people get obsessed with self-help, like all their life, all they do is try to optimize everything. They try to, they try to meditate, run cold showers, read myriad self-help books. In fact, I saw this really interesting statistic. I can't pull it up now because I gotta find it, but it said that majority of people that buy self-help commodities, so like self-help products, whatever, courses, books, all that, they're generally a really high number, like 80 or 90%, that they're recurring customers. It's the same people that keep buying this stuff. Because what happens is, I think people get, to use a Lacanian term, a sense of jouissance from just the act of engaging in self-help. I'm going to read 10 self-help books, despite all of them virtually saying the same thing. Like, it's not that advanced. It's just like basic stuff. You don't have to be a genius to, have habits, be disciplined, have some framework, have a calendar, have a to-do list. I mean, no shit, Sherlock. You don't have to be a genius to know that, right? And but then people get, like, what's this? Tiago Forte's second brain thing, where you like optimize it, everything's productive. From the processes itself, people find a great sense of pleasure, although I would use a more psychoanalytical term, jouissance, where then it's not, there's no real, they really aren't really doing anything apart from optimizing their lives. So apart from self-helping, and that becomes the whole life. And it's kind of a sad existence if you think about it, because like, there's no creative outlet, there's no creation per se. It's just this like very, in a peculiar sense, narcissistic obsession with the self.
No,
and my question, the way I like to always think is like, I like to think of, we humans, I'm a Hegelian, so we're historical beings, right? Imagine if Napoleon or Churchill spent 6-7 hours a day focused on self-help. Like, imagine Napoleon before he went to, was trying to beat the Nazis, woke up in the morning, meditated, had the cold shower and did all these things. We would probably all be speaking German, and you and I we wouldn't even be born. We'd probably be our parents would have died in some concentration.
One would imagine Napoleon to have been more effective, but I don't think that would be the case.
I don't think it would be.
He would have not stopped reading and
you see, a self-help ideologue would say, oh, if Napoleon or if Churchill did all these optimization things, they would be even better at that, whatever they did as leaders, let's say. I disagree. I think the greatness that doesn't come from this very little tweaks, optimization here and there. It comes from something even beyond what you can articulate. It comes from, to use a Nietzschean term, from trying to be that Ubermensch, So it comes from in some sense, the greatness comes from some kind of insanity. There's like a sense of insanity to what they're doing. And it's self-help ruins all of that. It makes you a very tepid, vanilla kind of person. And that's why, I'm going to be totally honest, man, most people I talk to who are hyper obsessed with self-help, and I used to be one of these people, so I kind of know a few people who I used to be a part of a pyramid scheme, MLM. Unfortunately, I got sucked in as a kid. So I still know a few people who are in that circle. Great people, lovely people.
Oh, well, we all do.
Yeah. Everyone's been a part of Amway, right? It's just like, I think Bill Clinton was a part of Amway. So anyway, lovely people, but man, they're so boring. All they do is obsess over like, focus on your dreams, your goals. Yeah. So
I think the interesting thing is they're very, you can say they're boring, but they're also very obnoxious in a very interesting way.
Oh, I mean, look, okay, I can't speak for being obnoxious because I'm an obnoxious guy.
No, that's true. That's true. I think this.
I need to be a bit self-aware.
So maybe just what I wanted to mention earlier as well, and you will tie here. It's like how self-help used to look like was morals. Right, it's a lot of morals and ethics, but then that wasn't the end alone. You weren't always.
I would say it's phronesis, to use a term by Aristotle. Phronesis, kind of this like pragmatic wisdom.
Wisdom, yeah.
Aristotle uses some phronesis, which is like a very interesting.
I haven't heard of that one. So yeah, that's
it's like how to engage in the world as a virtuous person.
Yeah. No, that's right, and I think that's the, like, it's along the lines of how to conduct yourself. It's virtue, right? But it's actually, that's like, in that case, it's not the means becoming the ends. Like, I think the means are still the means and the ends are still the ends, right? Like, when you look at it, people in ancient times, like, there's no way to parade that you're someone who's someone who's thought about all of these things and someone who does all of these routines on the side. because they're actually parading things.
Well, they can only embody it, really. I mean, the only way to be a virtuous person is
exactly
embody it.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's no other, as in the self-help people can very. I mean, we all do this. I do this with philosophy, for instance. It's, to use a term by Judith Butler, performativity. We show that, look at me, I'm doing all these things, and I'm performing the role of what a self-help person would typically do, which is productivity, meditation, all of this. But then it's a bit unfair to say it's just something self-help people do. I think in postmodern, which is why I said it's a postmodern phenomena. In postmodern culture, everyone does that. We are all performing something. We are all putting on a performance because we live in this kind of groundless existence. Our being has no.
Well, true. But
I have one more point to make on the political side. I'll make that point and I'll let you go. Is that all right?
Yeah, okay.
Or do you want to respond though to the point?
Well, actually, maybe I'll go first because you probably take a while with that one, knowing you.
No. This is actually no. I think I already okay. To be honest, the existential point for me is the important one, because the political one, it's not just self-help. I think it's given our current milieu, our ideology, and many things connect to this. But I would put it simply, I think self-help is also a conformist category, because it's this idea that this connects to the whole therapism, all the conversations we've been having before. The idea that, focus on myself, don't critique society. The Jordan Peterson thing, clean your room before you criticize the world. Focus on myself, focus on improving, focus on my immediate life, getting my finances in order, getting my personal life, my personal, whatever, health, wealth, whatever in order, spiritual life, whatever you may call it. And don't critique structures. Don't be critical of neoliberalism, the capitalism, whatnot. So it's the moment one steps into the ideology of self-help, you already taken on many there's a lot of ideological baggage that comes along with it. It's not so self-help certainly is not an apolitical thing. It's not something that just exists, again, independently. This is within our culture. So, which is why that it's the funny thing is that existentialist critique, I think it perfectly connects to the political critique, because the essentially when you replace the means, when the means become the end, then there's no real end, right? Because it's a postmodern phenomena. The end of, let's say, again, we want to create a more just society. We want to create a society where there are less people suffering, where we want to create a society where there's more love, let's say. We want to create a society which is perhaps a lot more like what Christ taught us. None of those things matter, because the end is already there. The end is engaging in these self-help things and not critique society. So then there's no, it's like this very kind of like, it's a slave category. It's like this tepid existence where you never question society. You kind of live this zombie existence in many ways, which is really interesting, because if you look at people who are engaged in self-help, you're right, they are rather obnoxious. You think that, man, they're people who are getting things done, they're so productive. But no, sometimes you should step back and question why you're doing what you're doing. Just do it the way Nike says it itself is a ideological imposition. It's an injunction. Do what? Do what, mate? But that's why I think they're both. There are many existential drawbacks, but certainly there are many political drawbacks of self-helpism, the ideology of self-help. Anyway, that's the point. You go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That kind of relates to what I was intending to say as well. But like the whole thing around being obnoxious, right? I certainly get like performativity is something that's prevalent in every facet right now, right? With the whole rising of technology and the proliferation of social media and people just being more public about everything, right? It's kind of natural that people wear their masks and they kind of they are their masks a lot more, let's say, right?
Well, I mean, Lacan would say that there's no truth behind the mask. There's
no truth behind the mask, let's say, but it's still like people perform on the stage a lot more performatively.
Well, I mean, let's put it this way: the current societal structures and the fact that we live in a postmodern culture, it easily paves the path for performativity. Whereas, as you said, in the past, it probably wouldn't be as possible to be as performative as we are now. But now everything is an act of performativity. Yeah.
But the comment there I have is that there is a kind of performativity that kind of what's the word? It fetishizes its own self, like its own difference, almost, right? So I think
Good point. Expand on that. That's a good point.
Yeah, so
Expand.
like
I know what you're saying, but expand on it.
Yeah. So like performativity, like what we're doing, I think, philosophy, or maybe whatever you call this, right? Just love or like beauty and things like this. There's definitely an element of performity. If people engaged in love, they're just like harping on about their love all the time, and family and romantic affairs and whatnot. And the same for the aesthetes, and for us who read philosophy, we're saying what we learn and this and that. But I think there's a type of this sort of performativity. We are at least a little bit more conscious about the performative aspect in a way, and it's more like we relish in the universal thing, right? Like, say, when you come to a philosopher engaging with the world and engaging with fellow philosophers, it's never like, oh, I'm better than you. And if they are, I don't think they're real. Maybe, well, actually, I take that back. I feel like Nietzsche would probably disagree with what that is, because he's better than everyone. But
it's a hard thing to question, because like I don't want to portray philosophers as being these wise men who are like humble and they know how to adjust in the world. In fact, quite the contrary. Some of the greatest philosophers were actually terrible human beings. Heidegger was a Nazi. Nietzsche was an incel. Kierkegaard, Kierkegaard, the more I know about him, he seems like an interesting guy. Like, he was a fun guy, but still a bit of a weirdo. Kant was, I think, a virgin till he died. Never had sex with a woman ever in his life. Like, that's kind of weird, man. Think about that. Like, the guy who's perhaps the greatest philosopher of greatest modern philosopher died a virgin. That's like, it's quite interesting, and then, well, Hegel, my guy Hegel. He's pretty cool guy.
He's pretty good. But at least I don't think Hegel. Yeah. I still think there's an element where philosophers relish more so in what is universal, right? So they're always looking.
Oh no, I agree. The reason I interjected was because I didn't want to portray philosophers as like these.
Oh no, that's true. That's true.
Men who are like perfect, who got it all figured out. Not real. That's not what philosophers are. Yeah.
That's fair enough. But and then on the flip side, I think it's the self-help people. I think we can also they're kind of like vegans, right? They fetishize themselves by their difference. They're like, I am different than you because I do X and Y, and I'm gonna relish in my difference. And this is the difference that's gonna keep me better than you. And so that's what the element I think I was alluding to when I mentioned obnoxious. It's kind of obnoxious in a way that satisfies itself by its own difference. And for a philosopher, it's a bit more complicated, right? Because I think many times a philosopher kind of makes an irony of his own being called a philosopher. His own.
Totally. In fact, I think our favorite, yours and mine, Kierkegaard, does that the best, right?
Yeah. Like, they would mock themselves at being called a philosopher. And I started reading Marcel, and he wrote a small phrase. I can't remember what it was, but it's stuck in my head. It's something along the lines of that I might write something along the lines of a Marcelism. And when I say this, it hits with a note of parody in my head, something like that, right? So it's like, philosophers, I guess, are more conscious about these things. But I think self-help and this type of obnoxious attitude, right, tends to be more like, I am different to you. And it's kind of, that's all there is, right? It's all about, it's kind of feeding itself on the difference. And that's kind of the trap there is it's simple. It's pride, right? Like, you think you're better than everyone else. You have these, like, an easy example is like every self-help bro does the same thing, or sis, whatever you want to call it. They're the type who wakes up 5 a.m. every day.
Look, I'm telling you, man, anyone who wakes up at 5 a.m. and does the whole cold showers thing, they like anal beads. Into anal beads. Like, that's who wants to do that?
We can discuss those things a separate time. They're also the type of person who like reads 10 books. They like count the number of books they read every year.
Oh my god, yeah.
You're the kind of person who would say like, oh, I read 300 books last year.
Those are the worst, aren't they? Those are the worst. So like, look at me. And it's so interesting. Those videos get millions of views.
Exactly. Like, how did I read 300 books this last year? Yeah, in a week. How did I do it?
Yeah.
Right? That sort of thing.
Like, who gives a shit? Like, give me an idea. Or what's the idea I got? Oh, the idea I got was that you should be a bit more disciplined. Wow. No way, really? Discipline? That's amazing. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so you made me think of something really interesting as you was talking about difference.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. You know, here's the irony of the matter, right? Um, don't you think the ultimate irony of you good?
Yeah, sorry, my WhatsApp notifications was just blowing off.
Cool.
All right, I just muted it.
Oh, all good, all good, all good. Is it have you offended any self-help bros?
Oh, well, I'll have to check later on.
You had to check, yeah, yeah. No, it's fine. They're probably already going to bed because they've got to be up at 5 a.m.
That's true. That's a good point.
But like,
Yeah.
no, what I was gonna say was, yeah. So, dude, the irony of the whole thing when you were saying this, I was like, oh my god, you hit the nail on the head. The difference itself creates conformity. Because think about it, right? Most of these self-help people, they're like generic human beings. They're like a blueprint of what a self-help person should be, and they are that person. So the irony,
they're their own caricature, right?
and they become their own caricature. It's hilarious. And in a way, that perhaps is all of us. We all, in a way, become our own caricature. But there's something rather peculiar given our times with self-help people, particularly them. They become their own caricature, and then there's no difference. That is the same. That again goes back to my point about the existential point, where then all they are these people who want to optimize their life and be more productive. You know, it's like
yeah. But it's also because I think a lot of what they serve is the image, right? And so that's the thing about being conforming, being a conformist, right? It's not that you're trying to serve an end that you're trying to arrive at. Not necessarily. It's more that you're trying to conforming to an image of what you're supposed to be. That, you know, then you can kind of just, now we can go on to what desires are, why people desire what they desire, and why people idealize what they idealize. But as you say, right, with the self-help person, it's very much you get caught up in this image that you're creating. It's not even like there's no ends in it. That's the end in itself, right? The fact that I've posted 10 books that I've read this year, that's the end, right? Like you're not, I highly doubt that any of those people are like, out of the 300 books I read last year, here is how I'm applying all 300 of them into my life. That's probably secondary. And it's already an irony if it's secondary, right? Because why are you reading books? Like it's for the image, right?
Yeah, well, there's something interesting though. I would say there is an end generally, and here's where I you know, like Cohen says, your desire is the desire of the other. The idea is whatever this ought that they're supposed to do, so from point A to B, the B, it isn't something spontaneously, like authentically comes to us. It is put to us by our culture. The world we live in tells us what to desire. Is a Lacanian point. So I would say, yeah, I mean, self-help people do have they do go somewhere in many ways. I mean, a lot of them become like successful business people. Let's say not a lot of them. Actually, in fact, I would say it's a minority. Most people go nowhere with self-help. It's a minority. And I think the end is partaking in neoliberal capitalism. The end is, yeah, making more money, buying your fifth investment property and making the proper investments. But that, of course, isn't unique to self-help people. That's all of us, given we live in, that's the ideology of the day, ideological system of the day, or the edifice of the day. But I think what's particularly sad, I would say, though, in comparison to, let's say, a person who isn't that obsessed with self-help, is that at least a person who isn't that obsessed with self-help, they have some leisure time or leisure, however you may pronounce it. Like they have some time to like relax and take it easy and hang out with friends and family, or maybe work on a hobby, do some creative thing. Whereas people who get hyper obsessed with self-help, even their leisure time is, it's to recuperate, it's to recover, to go and do more. We live in the society of doing, right? So it's like we've lost the subtle art of not doing anything at all, or the subtle art of relaxing or idleness, you know. And again, these things are just like idiosyncrasies of particular human beings. Like for me personally, I struggle very much to relax because I'm an obsessional neurotic. I have to always be doing something. I have to write, code something. If not, my life is to feel complete. So it's fine though. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that. But I'm trying to understand like why there's something really ironic about the whole.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's like there is something about it. I do think there is an element of, so it opened up what you just mentioned. It opened up an interesting thought for me. Or a line of thought that's still undeveloped. I don't know where it's going to end yet. But the thing about self-improvement is it's very ironic, because that's the nature of how humans live. That's human nature, right? We're all about getting from point A to point B. We are, I think, how I see.
Hold on. I want to challenge you there. That's a very like evolutionary argument.
Yeah,
right?
wait, no, I'm not done yet. Give me a while. I would add on to that and say we're teleological creatures, right? We look at the world, I think, in terms of a purpose, in terms of meaning. That's why people ask about what's the cause and effect, the desired cause and effect that we want to produce, right?
But that's not all we are.
It's not all we are, but I think it's very much what drives human action and narration as well, right? It's like, that's why we're always incomplete, and we're always trying to get somewhere.
That is true. That I agree. The fact that we are always incomplete, 100% I agree. That is true.
Yeah, and we're always trying to get somewhere. That's what I mean by point A to point B.
We are looking for ontological wholeness. We're looking to complete ourselves.
Yeah. So that's what I mean by teleological way of being, right? We're always trying to go somewhere, and we see the world from the viewpoint or the lens of where we are going, like a purpose, right? And you can go into any arena. You can fight a war. You know that your purpose is to become a hero or to serve your nation. You can start a business, and you know that your purpose is to
be profitable,
make the world a better place, or profit, right? Whatever, right? I think more often.
It's rarely make the world a better place.
Well, at least let's say consciously, right? What they're driven by is that, right? Or however they rationalize themselves to be, like the thing themselves to be. I think that's fine. Or if they want to raise a family, their end goal is like, I want to spread my seed. I want to raise beautiful children. I want to have a beautiful family. I think self-help is kind of it's more ironic than any one of these, even though they're all similar ways of being, because self-help is kind of, the point A to point B is kind of a caricature of itself, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's this human nature of us always wanting to get from point A to point B. Self-help is just like, I am all about getting from point A to point B.
Oh, I get what you mean. What I am is a getting.
It's true. Like, what they get is that humanity and being a human is all about getting somewhere. But then they kind of, that becomes all they are, the getting somewhere. Right. And that's why they're always eternally getting somewhere. And they're always like, their whole identity is formed around this getting somewhere.
Here's what's interesting of what you say. I know you're reading Gabriel Marcel, and Marcel, I think it's in what's it, Man and His Mystery. What's his big book? The one what's the one you're reading? Man.
I don't actually remember. The Mystery of Being.
The Mystery of Being. I believe in that book he tells, I haven't read the whole thing, I've skimmed it, that we human beings are cosmic vagabonds. We in fact are always getting somewhere. We never don't arrive at a destination. But I think it's that reality of being human that the self-help industry hijacks and exploits. The fact that
exactly that's what I'm trying to say.
Completeness. The self-help industry just takes that our incompleteness and be like, okay, this industry will provide you everything you need to fulfill yourself. So ironically, like capitalism, and I got this from Todd McGovern, self-help works by not working. Because if self-help works, then you get your point, and then it's done. The industry collapses. It has to work by just keeping you on the edge of I'm gonna get there. If I do these things, I'll get there eventually, and then it never really work. And even when they work, it works in like a pseudo sense, in the sense that, okay, let's say someone's goal was to, I don't know, man, be this much productive. Let's just say 5 units of productivity. I don't know what that means. Like, okay, let's say my goal is I'm reading all these books, doing all these things. It's to make $10,000 more this year than the previous year. But of course, once you make the $10,000, that will only last. It's a very ephemeral thing. The moment you get the $10,000, then you're like, okay, but then my pleasure, my jouissance, it didn't come from the $10,000. It came from the act of working towards getting this $10,000. And that's because we are never ontologically whole. What we're desiring is ontological wholeness. So it's and in that sense, the self-help industry, if you want to make money, man, the best thing you could probably do is become like a self-help guy. It's just like write books, or like start, join an MLM and like get people to, recruit people. And I kind of know this quite a lot because I used to do this thing. I was a part of as I told you, part of an MLM, right? And again, I'm not critiquing individuals. There's no use. The more I've studied sociology, I've realized there's really no use criticizing individuals. It's the structures and industries and the ideological edifice that we are within that makes people become like this.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, as you like to mention as well, but it's like the capitalist machine that keeps all this going as well, right? Because it's the whole capital idea is that, it's this exactly what we just mentioned, right? It's the desire is always just away from you, right? It's just one purchase away. It's one purchase away, right? In the same way, you've got this self-help kind of machinery works in the same way, right? You've got this ideal. It's this, ultra strong macho man that you want to get to that you're not at yet. It's this guy who wakes up at 5 a.m. every day. It's like David Goggins who runs insanely and does insane stuff.
Dude, the guy yells at you. I'm telling you, man, I'm telling you, some of these David Goggins bros, they would get the guy into their house and be like, my wife, and they would really David Goggins,
yeah. But it's very interesting.
To be honest, I do like David Goggins. I get that's the irony of it. There's something about him that I like. I think some people should be told get off.
No, that's true. That's true. But I think again, his kind of thing has been hijacked by the whole self-help idea, right? Or maybe he has hijacked himself into it because I haven't read his stuff. I know he's kind of posited himself within that world.
Yeah, but because now he's stuck. He has no other option. Now he's become the guy that yells at you. That's
yeah. But
I feel bad for the guy now. Like he can't just mind his own business and I don't know, just live a life normally. Now he's got to keep telling people who's going to carry the boat and all that stuff.
His stuff is actually pretty original. I give him that. So I think if he came at it at a different way, people might have called him a philosopher of will or something like that, right? The thing about being in self-help is quite funny. It's like the same thing as the capitalist machinery is. They're always telling you one vision. They're always telling you that the vision's just that far away from you. Sorry, they're always telling you a vision that's just that much further away from you that you just have to get to. And the vision's always a conformist category, right? Like with the capitalist vision, it's something like happiness, attainment, having the object of your desire, right? You get what you want, you get whatever, right? It's with self-help is like the ideal is just the vision's just always that, like the perfect man, the perfect woman is just always that far away from you. And you're always just trying to get there and get there and get there. And then again, it's kind of a parody of the getting there, right? Which is the fact that humans we see the world from the lens of a telos, right? Like there's always a completion that needs to happen. It kind of parodizes this whole thing, right? Because we're always trying to get somewhere, and self-help is like the getting somewhere that you should be fascinated with, and that we're always going to keep you in because you're never going to get there, right?
Yeah. And I have a question to ask you after this on everything you said, but one other thing, kind of like more like an ancillary point, but I think it's worth mentioning. You said that all the self-help bros are generally like these alpha macho men who just want to go work hard, fucking go to the bench, go and do bench press and work hard and all that, whatever. The macho bros, or the alpha bros, but it's also the other side is these people who get into new age spiritualism, which has even a strain of fascism, but I don't want to get there. Is this like, divine feminine and like what's this moon healing, and they're looking for wholeness. Like, I am a divine woman, I'm one with the universe, my divine feminine and my divine masculine. That is certainly still a part of this self-help industry, because again, what we're looking for is this completeness, right? So they do like obsess over yoga and all that, typical white lady stuff, and then
maybe, but actually I might disagree with you there, because I think
go for
with
it,
the self-help stuff, it's a lot more you're always just going towards, right? There is not an end point. I think with the spiritual stuff, as we categorize it, right, there's a lot more of an end point, at least with them. It's kind of, if you're getting into spirituality, the idea is not that you remain in this bubble forever. It's that you attain something, a nirvana or whatever, right? A state of being or a mindfulness.
Yeah.
And so I would give them a little bit more credit for that.
I see your point. Although here's where I would kind of counter that your the way I counter your counter. I put it this way. I think even there though, it's still the promise of, let's say, spiritual wholeness, right? Like you can come to one with your emotions and who you are in like a spiritual sense. Your soul, your spirit, whatnot. And these things are certainly even religious ideas, but the problem though is it also never works, because people who get into the whole new age spiritualism, that becomes their life. Their whole life becomes how they do like yoga workshops or new age workshops or whatnot, and healing. Some of this stuff is kind of crazy. I was seeing a girl who was heavily into like crystals and whatnot. Like she's a lovely person, man. But I'm telling you, like it makes you a slave, because then all their life, like I don't want to talk about her. Let's just say hypothetically, some other person, all their life consists of is this like cult of spirituality, where it is, again, they're told you can be in this case, let's say, spiritually whole, but I think ultimately it's ontological wholeness. But they never do get that wholeness, because if they do get that wholeness, then they wouldn't partake in this act constantly, right? They wouldn't partake in all these different workshops and whatnot. So I don't see a huge difference except how it manifests. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
I get what you're trying to say, but I think where I place self-help is within a process, right? And I think the thing about spirituality is it's a process. It acknowledges that, but it has a clear purpose at which it strives to. I think it's like spirituality, you strive to a state of being, a oneness, a something, right? And it's similar to religion. So I guess religion, you can talk about it in the same way, right? Like even in Christianity, God's this great other, it's this great ideal. Christ is the way, right? Aside from the truth and the life, he's the way. You're always aspiring to the way, and you're always miserably failing, right? That's why, like Dostoevsky's, in the Brothers Karamazov, it's like Christ came back. It's like, oh, should have never come. Like, your way is too hard. Like, no one's ever going to get it, basically, right? No one's ever going to get there. It's just too hard for us. It's too much of a burden. And so, I think spirituality is more it's more a sibling to be more charitable.
Oh no, I wouldn't even say sibling. It's a bastardization of religion, in my opinion.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I'll try to be more charitable, but yeah, we can say that. We can say that.
Here's why I would defend Christianity. Christianity, the brokenness and completeness is inbuilt within the Christian system. Christianity itself,
that's true.
Man has fallen. Whereas I would say New Age spiritualism generally, you're perfect, like there's like you're pure, like and which is again why I said it's a neo-fascist element to it, because fascism, what they all look for is organic unity, and New Age spiritualism also has this like organic unity, you with society and then the world and then the universe and then God, and then you are God in that sense, right? So whereas like okay, here you're probably going to disagree with me here, but my radical reading of Christianity is that even God himself is incomplete. We don't have to get there. That's a whole other conversation.
Get that at some point.
I mean, leave aside the radical Christianity. Just let's say contemporary Orthodox Christianity, like what we currently subscribe to in most churches, have the fallenness of the human being within the system. Whereas I would say New Age spirituality doesn't have that within the system. And it just says that partake in these acts. That's fine. Yeah.
I agree with you. And so that's what I was getting to as well. Like spirituality is very much related in relation to the religious, right? Religion. I wouldn't categorize self-help within that. Like I would categorize self-help as the kind of the parody of the process itself. Like in
I see what you're saying.
Religious and spiritual idea, it's getting from A to B. And in self-help, it's a parody of the process. And so maybe it's worth, like, I guess the question here then is, what should getting from A to B look like, right? Why is self-help, I guess, not the way? And I guess like my thinking, right, is I like to categorize the world by the finite and the infinite. That's a very Kierkegaardian idea, right? There's the finite at which we're at, there's the infinite at which we aspire to, and that's kind of the telos. That's always the let's say the transcendental oneness or unity that we always aspire to, that we always fail to, but we nevertheless aspire to and toil towards, right? And that's the reason why we seek meaning in life, why we seek meaning in the world. But we always fail to find some kind of completeness, and we always try and seek it somewhere, right? And so this is the whole idea of, to bring back the concept of God. It's like, God didn't really die, right? We're always just, when God dies, we just look for a new God. Let me try and find a quote. Chesterton, I think, wrote, like, when we cease to worship God, we do not worship nothing, we worship anything, right? And so we're always kind of looking to get from point A to point B, which is the perfect thing at which we can never actually reach. And I think what that entails, I think a good aspiration on that front is an aspiration to the infinite. And so it has an end, right? It's like, for example, religion, it's like oneness with God. And so you're aspiring there. It's an impossible task. And so similar to the self-help person, it's never ending. But the difference there is, as you said in the beginning, right? With self-help, the end, the means becomes the end, because self-help is actually very good, right? Like for many people in their stage of life, or like actually, I would even say it's one of the better ideologies to be stuck in, because it encourages you to be better, right? And so as part of religion, you're always trying to get from point E to point B. You're always trying to get to a place that's better for you, for the world, for whatever. Self-help kind of leads you down that path, except it's a kind of parody of that path because it doesn't have an end, right? But that's exactly what makes self-help, like, it kind of it makes it.
Even if it has an end, it's generally the end of the contemporary ideology, which for our time just, again, capitalism. Yeah,
that's true. And so I would call that kind of a more finite thing, right? And so I think the thing about ideals now, I guess, is you do justice, at least now I'm kind of using my own words, but I find you do more justice to life when you reach for an infinite ideal. And so
I agree. I mean, in many ways,
who seeks unity with God, or like the person who goes out to battle, seeking to serve the symbol of his nation and become a hero. These are all infinite things, because like they're kind of grand ideals in which you can tell your story. Or like a Nietzschean ideal, you can say in the same way, right? I'm going to become a free spirit. I'm going to become, a Ubermensch, right? A super version of myself. But where kind of the thing stops at the finite, right? Where the ideal stops at the finite, for example, with self-help or with, tech bros. Well, tech bros is a different one. Like business bros, we're always like, my goal is to make lots of money. And it's kind of, that's my telos, right? To make lots of money. Once you actually do make it, like, you're done, right? Life has no more meaning. Why don't you kill yourself now, right? And so it's kind of that thing, right? It's a very interesting reality is that a very interesting reality is that humans serve infinite ideals when they toil for eternity towards something that's transcendent. It's better for them than when they have to face, when they base their entire life, the telos of their whole life on one thing, and then at its end, like when they actually make money, they face the abyss of, kind of not having anything to strive for anymore. And I think there's heaps of rich people out there who have felt this, right? Like when they attain whatever position they wanted to attain, like billionaires, they sold their business, or people who have climbed to a partner CEO role, and they're like, oh, now what, right? And then now they become depressed because they thought that this thing would make them happy for eternity. It does not, obviously, we already know that, but they don't have anything to replace it with. And that's because they kind of served a finite thing the whole time.
I have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I don't know. Partially, I agree, but also I've begun to start thinking about this idea of infinite ideals a lot too. Particularly because of my I wouldn't say new. I've been having this line of thought for about 2 years now. This kind of radical Christianity. The thing with the infinite ideals is, okay, let me ask you let me try to use like a solid example, right? So if okay. When one speaks of the infinite, the only way to speak of the infinite is in religious terms. So therefore, I'm going to use religious terms. There's no other way to speak of the infinite, really. So, okay, salvation. In Christianity, you attain salvation through Christ. That's what at least we are told in the more like contemporary, the current Christian doctrines. I have my critique of that too, but that's a different conversation. So what if, okay, this is a very brutally, this is a very, very like vulgar, brutal question, but let's say like a mega church tells, come to Christ, come to God, and you'll be saved. And then you do the altar call, whatnot. And then people accept, Jones, I declare God, whatever, by Savior Jesus Christ, truth and the way, life, whatever. And then they're like, okay. And then what? Like, am I at one with the infinite? Am I saved? Do I even know I'm saved? Like, because for me, my understanding is this, where I think Kierkegaard is brilliant, where he says like it's the angst itself that defines our condition. It's like we don't ever really know if we are saved in many ways. So like when you're, let's say, when you're dealing with the infinite, how do you know that you're in fact really pursuing the infinite, and the fact that, let's say, you're at one with the infinite in some sense?
That's a very good question. I would think of it. I would think of salvation in this sense very much as something like marriage. What marriage is to love. It's like what marriage is to love, in the sense that there's this ideal that you're working towards. It's infinite. And getting married to the other person isn't so much, isn't a declaration of we're now one. Although I know in the scripture it says we're one under the eyes of God. I think that still doesn't mean one within the eyes of love. Like in our
but even that scriptural verse, it's a very famous verse. It's not the idea that like one and you're done. There's a bit more depth to that.
It's a lot more depth to that. And we had this chat a while back as well. But I think there's the idea of love as a construction, right? Marriage is something like a commitment to the construction. That's how I think it is. And I think it's kind of similar in the salvation sense. It's like the nature of human nature is very much about going from point A to point B. And we can serve any God. If it's not God, it's some other God. It could be it could be like the god of money, right? It could be the god of
sex, pornography,
right? Or celebrities, right?
In fact, I would argue in our culture, primarily it's now celebrity worship. Our gods are the celebrity culture.
Like we look towards them and we want to be them, right? So in this very interesting way, salvation looks like kind of your worldview, in a way, is reoriented. And so it's kind of restructured, right?
Okay.
And so I think about that in the same way as marriage. It's like, it's no longer that, you're serving this and that, but you are committed entirely to a construction of this. Towards
brilliant. I think this is the best point you made in this conversation, because that's my understanding of salvation too. Okay.
Yeah.
How about you contrast, just so that we can really flesh out that point, juxtapose kind of self-help ideal of whatever money in capitalism with this idea of salvation that reorients your life itself at a very fundamental existential level.
Yeah, that's a challenge, right? But I think
because it's a really good point to make. Yeah.
So earlier I mentioned something. I think that's one aspect. I mentioned it standalone, but I think it's only one aspect. I said there's the infinite. And I guess the impression I gave is, I mean it from a duration of time sense. You serve a thing for eternity until you die. In your last moment, you get to say, I have run the race. I have fought the good fight. That's a verse in the Bible. It's a very nice thing to be able to say, right? Nice is an understatement. Like, if you're able to say that when you die, like, I'd say you've lived a pretty awesome life, right? You've done justice to life. And so that's the duration of time aspect. There's the doing justice to aspect. I think there's the whole element of, there's somehow the whole element of depth that I fail to really expound as well. There's the thing about living a shallow life, and then living a life that's like, it's hinged through the deepest parts of being human. And this thing is very difficult to explain, right? Because it's just, if you live your whole life chasing things that don't really mean much, then you don't get the sense of having done justice to life. If you spend your entire life doing things that mean a lot, and this is very subjective, right? But while I say subjective, there are objective patterns as well. Like, there are usually things like family, right? It's the love of your life.
Love would be I want to interject here. Sorry, I know I
Go ahead.
I would say I wouldn't just purely make it a relative subjective thing, because love is perhaps the quintessential example here. The content of love, it changes, certainly. The way certain cultures experience love is different. The way the way individuals experience love is different. Different sexualities, whatever you may call it. But I think that while the content can change, the form of love is universal. It's supra historical, supra cultural reality of it's got an, I would give it an ontological place, love, in being itself, in fact.
I agree with you. And it's the thing that I fail to explain is why it's like that, right? Like, I don't know why. It's just how it is. For some reason, humans have been wired such that love means a lot more to a human being than does. Sorry, not even just because love, you can make it metaphysical and relate it to everything, right? The love of a human being, for example, subsumes the love of any object for some reason.
Okay, here I'll give you a good example, right?
Yeah.
I think the best way to become an environmentalist is to be radically anthropocentric. What I mean by that is, there's this idea with this kind of new environmentalism where we say, oh, Mother Nature, it's like it's neo-paganism. Mother Nature is divine. Mother Nature has to heal. So we anthropomorphize Mother Nature. Forget about that. No. We love Mother Nature. We want to fight climate change. We want to take care of the environment. We want to make sure that we move to green technologies and sustainable energy, not because Mother Nature has some kind of conscience, or it's conscious. That's paganism. It's because we humans believe in love as an ethical, metaphysical category, and we love reality itself in that sense. Not like, okay, again, this can get I'm splitting hairs here. So of course there's the argument you can't love an abstract humanity. I get that, but at a very basic level, really, to really dumb it down, I would like one day to be a father. I would like that. And I'm assuming I don't have kids. So I'm assuming if I do have kids, I love them deeply, more than I love anything else, perhaps. But it's because of my love for them, I want to take care of the environment, and I want to make sure that there's a future for them, that they have a future to live in. Not let capitalism destroy our civilization and our culture and our humanity itself. But it's not because I even care about nature. Like I care about nature because I care about human beings first and foremost. I put it that way.
Yeah,
and my future kids, let's say, I love you, and I want the world to be a better place because I'm like my brother Euwyn, like I want him to be in a good place. It's in that sense. It's not like an abstract love. Anyway,
we love somehow we love more profoundly in particular as opposed to universal.
Oh yeah, that's for sure.
So that's also a pattern to love. I fail to explain why that is the case. I think that's another thing we're talking about is what does justice to living, and you can only really explain it by axioms. This is why so many religions come at it with like positing things as a way, as an order, right? Like, for example, Taoism does this very well. It's like there's a way in which things are, there is a rhythm, there is a pattern, there is a movement, right? Whatever that you have to synchronize yourself onto. I know my analogies aren't very Taoist. I fail to get a more Taoist specific one in my head, but those are axiomatic claims as to what makes a good life, and they are somehow universal. So this is what I mean, right? Like, love that is infinite tends to be the love of things that are the most profound. And so, like, the love of your family, the love of your kids, your uh, of, I'm now trying to relate this to the love of God, which is an interesting idea. That's probably going to be a whole discussion to have. But
yeah, like what
I think it's a very interesting image. A very interesting image is every time you watch a dystopian movie, when the world is going to end, people pray. Why is that? That's a very interesting thing to do. Because like throughout all like 2012, I actually can't remember what happened in 2012. But okay, we watched recently there was a Netflix movie where the world ended.
Don't Look Up.
Don't Look Up, yes. And it's a very modern movie. And I don't think modernity or even like post-modernity is a different question, but I don't think either one's very fond of the idea of praying to a god, right? And it's very fascinating to see that at the end of people's lives, what they resort to is prayer.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? A very like crude, like vulgar way that the new atheists would be like, oh, people are just looking for like naive hope, false hope. And they'll just be, then you know what's and then there's like throw away that argument. I'm like, no,
why don't you find hope in each other? Like,
yeah,
why
but not even that. Not even, okay, that's one thing, but not even that. But that's, for me, that's lazy intellectual thinking. If you're a true intellectual, like let's say at a purely cerebral level, you would try to understand, why do people need this hope? Why do we desire this kind of hope? Let's say hope is what people are praying for, like, oh, I'm praying that things will work out, I'm praying for some kind of goodness. But then we need to try and, okay, I'll put it this way, we need to try and explore the phenomena of prayer the same way that we explore some kind of quantum phenomena. It's still a phenomenon in reality. It's not something you can just throw away. So that's a really good point. Like, why do we pray? Why do we need
something to do with, because like some people might even say like they're scared of going to hell, but that's not the image I get when I think about people engaged in prayer at the last, when the world is ending. They're not begging to not be sent to hell. They're usually hands together. That's usually the imagery where they're just saying a prayer, thanking.
It's an act of love. I mean,
it's an act of love, really. And so, yeah, that's a very good point. It's an act of love to each other, but also kind of to reality itself. But it's also kind of to, I think this goes back to what I mentioned earlier around this. There's a magic around being able to say, you know, I've run the race, I've fought the good fight. And that's to see yourself from the lens of the infinite, kind of, right? To see from the lens of everything. And to look back at yourself and say, you've done justice to everything. And so to me, that's where kind of prayer and God, that kind of last tribute to everything, comes in. So that's a very interesting thing. But what it brings me to, I guess, is that this is an extremely long exposition of like what is truly profound in life. What is deep, for what reason I fail to explain. There's probably lots of religious ideas floating around here that we can explain it in a different time or discuss. But this is the level of being, of existence, that's not even touched by the whole world of self-help, right? It's not even touched by the very least. Like, all you're concerned with as a self-help person is posting on Instagram how many books you've read in the last year, is like waking up at 5 a.m. every day and working out every single day. Like, sure, like that's good, man. Like, you know, you get from point A to point B. That's a very good thing. From here, you might lead yourselves down the path of the infinite and doing justice to life. A lot more. It's a lot more likely that you'll come down this route than if you were serving something else. Let's say, right? If you were, you know, doing drugs every single day, you were serving the god of revenge. Let's say you wanted to avenge reality because, you know, you hate God, right? That's perhaps a bit of a darker path that I think going to self-help it's good, right? It's great. Actually, I'm probably not doing it justice by juxtaposing it with such a bad thing, but like, you know, it's better than neutral, right? That you're going down a path of self-help. But there's a whole layer of profoundness and depth to human existence that matters, and it matters most evidently at the last moment of life. And it's not just a last moment thing. It's like, because, for example, regrets, right? At the last moment of your life, you regret how you lived your life. And it's usually, you know, I wish I did more of this. Wish I did more of that. Self-help really doesn't tend to touch any of that, any of those things.
I'm sorry, man, but I think virtually with everything you've said, I agree, except that where you kind of, because my thinking generally, because I'm an Hegelian, it's not very teleological. I don't like to think that, oh, we come to this point and then we reflect. I get what you mean, of course, like hopefully one day when I die, I can be like, I think I'm ready. Like I did what I can do, whatever. I lived my stupid life and now I can die, but it's just, there's something I would say is it's not even, there are modes of being, forms of existence. And I think essentially it always comes down to love, is that at that point, you're like, this is enough. Like, as in, I put it this way, right? Let's say like you and I, we had this kind of profound experience. And I've had moments like this in my life too. It's very rare. And probably every time it's been to do with love, either when I'm with my family, or it could be with a romantic love, and it's like, if I die now, I mean, yeah, I know I'm like a young guy, I would have done a lot of things, but I'm ready to go in like a really weird sense, like, but so what I'm trying to say is, like, it's not like you come to this point in the end of your life and you reflect and like, oh, look at this life I've lived. I feel like that profundity of that experience itself, that's, you're like, this is life, this is reality. It becomes something beyond what words can even express. And I know it comes, my God, it comes in, it comes in like in partaking in social justice. If you partake in some kind of civil rights movement, like, okay, so let me just find this quote by this quote by Martin Luther King, right? An individual has not started living. It's a very, very famous quote by him. An individual has not started living until he can rise above the narrow confines of his individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity. So, like, the idea is that with self-help, it doesn't let you rise to these broader concerns. And it doesn't have to be even at the level of an MLK. It could even be just looking out for your neighbor.
No, I agree with you. I actually agree with you. I think it's probably, so when I mentioned you look back, I see that as a marker of what concerns are broader than others, right? It's not that we are to arrive at this point and look back and this is going to define our entire existence. It's that what we, at our final moment, the things we tend to look back on, it tends to be a revelation of things that kind of embody this broader concern.
It's like qualitatively that revelation, like, oh, this is what mattered. This is what's
and like, why that is the case, I also don't know. It's very difficult to explain.
Oh, right? I mean, what's interesting about that, I would say, as like in a way, we can be like, we can make a naturalistic claim where that is reality as such. So, it's really interesting, right? Gilles Deleuze, and there's Hegel. So Gilles Deleuze says philosophy is inventing new concepts, whereas Hegel, or Hegelians, and I've primarily heard Todd McGovern say this, he would say it's discovering concepts. Now, I'm on the discovering side. I don't think philosophy is just inventing new concepts, because then it becomes meaningless in many ways. But it's like what you just described. It's like the revelation is like a discovery we make. We make a discovery. We're like, wow, this is what's true. There's nothing more true than this. Yeah. So about reality. So it's like a very kind of naturalistic claim you could make there.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. I think that's a really great way to put it. And I think that's kind of the revelation. It reveals to you what's important. And it's like what you mentioned, right? You mentioned social impact. That's kind of to do with love, right? Wanting to see the world you're wanting to do justice to the people around you.
Yeah, right. I mean, all love in the social domain, it manifests as justice.
Yeah.
It's to feel the pain of as Frantz Fanon said, the wretched, of the lowest of the poor, the marginalized. These days, trans people who are attacked, relentlessly. It's to feel the pain, the loneliness, anxiety they feel, and then try and do something about it. And again, it's like the famous Samuel Beckett line where Beckett says, what's it? Let me find it. Try again. Hold on. Yeah, try again, fail better. So it's not that even though you keep failing, you still keep trying. Try again.
Yeah, well, that's funny because that sounds very self-helpy.
Yeah, but then this is more in the sense. You're right, because the idea of self-help is, keep trying. But the idea is, I would say here, apply self-help principles. Like when it comes to social justice, yes, here's where self-help can be a great tool. Take some of the frameworks of, really, I just personally think one other, like this is like purely a personal bias of mine. I just don't think a lot of the advice self-help people give are that novel or that ingenious. Like, it's just like, no shit, like have habits, have a to-do list. But for me, that's like, okay, you need to like read 10 books for that, really? So it's kind of seems like self-evident to me. But the idea is, that feel the pain of the wretched of the earth, and then try to step out of your narrow margin, your narrow worldview of way of living. And sometimes you don't have to wake up at 5 a.m. to go for a run or a cold shower or whatever. Sometimes wake up at 5 a.m. to go and partake in a protest somewhere.
Yeah. Well, there is an order of things, I think, right? You can do justice to waking up at 5 a.m. every day. You're not going to die proud of it. You can do justice to
true.
The art that lies in your soul. You're going to die proud of it. Like, again, you asked me why. I don't know. That's just how it is. That seems.
No. I mean, it's really interesting where you said a couple of times, like, I don't know why that is. I'm coming to realize, and this goes back to my thing about philosophy, Hegel, discovery. It's like why is this pen here? I mean, okay, look, in speculative philosophy, it's important to ask why. I mean, this is what Kant was doing. Kant was never trying to understand how do we perceive things. No. If you truly deeply read Kant, in fact, this book here, the one on German idealism, really good book by Frederick Weiser. He says Kant's whole thing was he was trying to speculate in a speculative method, trying to understand how do things even appear to us in the first place? Like, how do we even have phenomena? It's not how we perceive things, but rather how in the first place do we even have phenomena in the world? So those things matter, but what I'm trying to say, like, some things are just the way they are.
Well, I think the reason why I'm a lot more, it's kind of similar to, let's say, why I think you were also very careful about the whole therapism bit, is because when an ideal is put forth, it's like the odds are a lot more touchy to work with than the is, right? Because I guess the odds are where a lot of evil has been done in the past. Like, for example, you ought to do this. Like women, you ought to be mothers and give birth to babies and love your families and do no more than that, right? And so that's the kind of careful territory that we tread when we talk about.
We need to question and be a bit more careful.
Yeah. And so I think in the same way, it's like when we talk about love here, love is the ultimate ideal, that somehow when we die, it kind of reveals to you that this and all of that was important. Like, it seems that this is important. Then again, the question is like, why should you love your family? What if I don't want a family? I'm like, I don't know. For some reason, life has decided that such a thing is important, right?
Well, I mean, but I would say love doesn't just manifest in a family. You certainly
that's true. But I do think it is one of the best examples. Although you could attribute that to being the example in which there has been the most historical evidence.
Well, that's true. Yeah, if you want to make an empirical claim, certainly. Yeah.
But like, I haven't seen much imagery of people dying just with best friends.
Yeah. The poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson, I don't know, man. Like, I would say, here's where I go back to that point about how love is universal, but the content of love, it's multifaceted, it's myriad. It's the form of love still exists. The famous poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson, it's what's it? In memoriam, tis better to love. Yeah, the one by Alfred Lord Tennyson. It is better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. That poem was, in fact, for his best friend. So it's like a poem. I think it was like a romantic poem, but it's not. It's in fact for his best friend. Yeah.
It reminds me of Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Have you watched that?
I haven't watched that. No.
You haven't watched that. You should. It's very good. But basically, it doesn't spoil anything. But Rocket has a family. Rocket the raccoon has a family. And he has a group of friends that he was born with. And that's basically his family. Like, every time he does something that's like, for example, when he's really doing something with the whole of his spirit, he's doing it with them in mind. But
yeah, there's something beautiful there.
He was just born with them. And so it's just popular cinema, right? But that still shows you, yeah, I think that's right. It doesn't have to be family. But well, yeah, I guess
I get your point, because like for me, I would say personally, I find that like for me, love is felt most potently outside of friendship. I'd say it's friendship and family. And I would probably put you in family on top of friendship, but then at least in my current level, it's friendship. Mostly for me, it's friendship now, and even family. But like again, I struggle to, I don't know. Some people might find love in, I mean, I don't know, like in like some kind of. I'm trying to think of an example outside of it's really hard to think of an example outside
but it's
of,
definitely not objects. That's the interesting thing. I guess at the end of the day, there are these ideals, right, that form ideals that somehow do justice to reality. And I guess if you make what's intended to be an end, intended's a very weird word, but I'm just going to use it anyway. If it's good, as intended as an end, and you serve that end, and it's an infinite end, self-help could be a good means of getting there, right? But that's if you put the means in the place of the means and the end in the place of the end, right? The interesting thing about infinite ideals is that they're not as taken over by the modern proclivity to perform.
Performativity, yeah.
It's also a very interesting thing, right? Because the religious people, there are people who perform definitely, but it's still rather clear that many of them, the genuine ones, they serve the end of a relationship with God, being one with God, oneness and whatnot. People who really, truly, genuinely love their family, they don't really care about the image that they put out. They might post baby photos and whatnot, but you know what? Like, sometimes it's rather clear to see when they genuinely love their kids, and you see them with their kids. And again, as perhaps was the case in the olden days, it's embodied, right? The ideals themselves are embodied. You look at it in their family and you see them together.
I mean, we should never be cynical about such things. Like, cynicism, I'm naturally a cynical person, but I don't think, I get what you mean. There's like even though I think perhaps all of existence has an element of performativity. Let's put it this way. Correct. Let me see what you think of this. All of existence has an element of performativity, because performativity isn't merely, it's not. So I think we should be clear with our definitions. Performativity isn't like it's not vanity. It's not just putting on a public show per se. It's more of a social role we partake.
A social game.
It's a social game, and we got to partake in that game because we are social creatures. We are creatures of language and whatnot. So
yeah. I mean, well, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing, but I think it is a bad thing when the entire act is absorbed in the performance. Then
it becomes vanity.
Yeah, that's correct. Like if you serve God, you can share it with your family. There's definitely going to be an element of performativity because, maybe you post scripture, and then part of your incentive for posting a scripture is so that people see you as a religious person. It's probably going to be an element of that. That's true.
You put the Bible verse on your Instagram.
On your Instagram caption. Or you post a vlog, or like what we're doing now. We're recording a podcast between the two of us to talk about these things.
There's certainly performativity going on.
Yeah, we're definitely performing. Like we like, it'd be nice if people see us as philosophers and whatnot. Like it sounds narcissistic and all to say.
No, dude. Of course, there's an element of narcissism in what we're doing. Like we want to be seen as.
Yeah. But I guess at the end of the day, right? If you have the ideal, I think if the ideal is something that does justice, like for us, I think it's conversation, it's love, it's like
it's aesthetics,
discovering truth and beauty.
Beauty.
Right. And so I think that's all in the right place, and that's like an infinite good that we can kind of do forever. I'm sure between the two of us.
I agree.
I mean, to kind of bring it back also, I think the ideals are as such, right? These are infinite ideals. For the self-help bros, I would almost kind of like, I think they're down the right path, right? Like we were once there. They're down the right path. Just at some point, you open the doorway into the infinite. At some point, you read a book. I think a very good entryway was the first one that actually kind of brought me to this area, which is Man's Search for Meaning, right? The book
Viktor Frankl.
It's kind of really popular. It's self-help, self-improvement, but it's written very interesting about psychotherapists. And he writes all about death and like finding meaning in death, meaning in life, and like, you know, and that's, I think, the sort of topic that brings you from productivity, business, success to the existential and that which truly matters, right? So in that way, self-help can be a doorway into this infinite dimension that we speak of so highly.
I like that I think this is a good place to end, in fact, because I like that you connected that to that, because as I said in the beginning of our conversation, this was a critique, not a criticism. So that therefore self-help itself, we're not trying to throw it away. We're just trying to give it a proper category, place it in where it should be, but rather say that it should be a means to an end, not an end in itself. Hey man, but look, as per usual, I mean, I feel like every single conversation you and I have is gonna end up in love. So how about to end it? I finish us off with a quote on love by Victor Hugo himself from Les Mis. All right, it goes like this. To love or have loved, that is enough. Demand nothing more. There is no other pearl to be found in the shadowy folds of life. To love is a fulfillment.